In this video, I'm going to show you how to download IntellIJ IDEA and install and configure a complete development workstation on a Windows 10 machine. The really nice thing about IntellIJ IDEA is it has everything included in it. Just by downloading this, you'll be able to get Git up and running, a JDK up and running, Maven up and running, and you'll be able to start programming professional or open source applications, or both, right away. So once you download it, we're just going to double click the installer to get started. All right, we're just going to next our way through most of it. We're going to choose 64-bit Java, and we can leave the other options blank. All right, we're going to check this checkbox to run IntellIJ IDEA, and that's going to start it up. We're going to agree to user agreement. We're not going to send anonymous statistics. I like to choose the light theme. Obviously, choose which one is preferable to you. To get started, we're just going to skip all the other screens and use the defaults. The default values they give you pretty much has everything you need to do development of just about any kind. We're going to use the 30-day evaluation for this demonstration. Before we get started, we want to install and configure some tools. First, we're going to get the Git, our version control environment, up and running. To do that, you're going to go to the configure, and then you're going to choose settings. We're going to go down to where it says version control. We're going to open this up. We're going to go into Git. And you're going to see a little test button here. This is going to test if Git is available on your machine. We already know it's not, of course. But clicking test does tell you it's not installed in red. And by the way, we can download it and install it for you by clicking this. So we're going to click this to download and install it. Okay, Git has been installed, so we'll click OK. Once you install Git, it's a good idea to close IDEA and restart it before continuing. Next, we're going to configure the Java Developer Kit. We do that by going into Configure, Structure for New Projects. We're going to click on this SDKs area. Click the plus sign here. We're going to download a JDK. There are many different Java Developer Kits that we can use. They are all essentially the same thing in terms of running your code. My personal favorite is Adopt OpenJDK. I'm going to choose version 11. That's the current LTS release, but any version will do just fine. Now that the developer kit is downloaded and installed, we just need to link in some documentation. You do that by clicking on the documentation path screens, and we click this plus with a little globe in it, and just click OK. This will allow us to use documentation from within the IDE. Next, we need to make a change to how the built-in version of Maven in IDEA behaves. So we're going to click on Configure, go into Settings. We're going to go into the Build, Execution, and Deployment section. We're going to go into Build Tools, and we're going to click on Maven. We're going to open this up and go into Importing. We want to choose these three checkboxes here. What this lets us do is when we start pulling in third-party libraries into our projects, it allows us to access its documentation from within the IDE and its source code, which is incredibly useful. Okay, we are ready to build our first application. So we're going to click on New Project. We're going to click on Maven. We're not going to choose an archetype. We're just going to go with a nice blank Maven file. And we're going to call our project Hello World. You'll notice that it creates a default set of artifact coordinates for our Maven project. And for our test project, this is perfectly fine. We'll work that example with an artifact of Hello World. Once IntellIJ IDEA starts up, it's going to start indexing and getting itself ready for the first time we've ever used it. So we're going to do a couple things here. We're going to turn off tooltips for now. We're going to, for this dialog prompt here, I'm just going to tell it to not show it to me again. And down here, there's going to be a whole bunch of actions that are happening in the background. If I click on it, it brings up this little window. We're going to wait until everything here is complete before we move on. Excellent. There's really two tabs that we're going to be working with. The project tab, which is already here, and this Maven tab. I'm just going to drag it over to this side. Our project right now consists of a source directory. This is using the standard structure that Maven defines, and our pom.xml file. Before we do anything, we want to enable version control. And you do that by going to the VCS menu and choosing the Enable Version Control integration. It knows that we're using Git, so we'll just click OK. And now it's created a Git repository for our project. We only want to add one file to our project, and that's this pom.xml. So we're going to right-click on it. We're going to go down to the Git menu here, and we're going to add this file. And the file now turns green. Green lets us know that it's in the repository, but it's not committed yet. It's a file that we're working on still. Now we're going to create our first source code file, our Hello World application. So we're going to right-click, New Class. We'll use a package org.example. We'll call the class main with a capital M. All classes in Java should start with a capital letter. It's going to ask us if we want to add this file to Git, and we're just going to say, sure, add. Okay, so what we need now is a public static void main to get started. In IntellIJ, they give you a lot of shortcuts for writing this kind of code really quickly. If I just type in PSVM, you'll see this autocomplete kind of drop down as I'm typing. And you'll notice that the first option, or only option, is a main method declaration. If I want to use that, I just press the tab key, and I get a public static void main string array of arguments. A very similar process is available for writing text to the screen. Normally we would write system.out.println, but there's shortcuts in IDEA for that as well. S-O-U-T. And as you can see, as I'm typing, it's showing me other possible usage. And then I can press tab, and it types that for me. And now we're just going to type in hello world. Now we're going to try to run our project. And you'll notice that there's really no way to run it. All these buttons are grayed out. We need to tell the IDE what kind of project that we're working with. Well, we're working with a console application. So we're going to click Add Configuration. We're going to choose this plus. We're going to pick Application. We're going to type in the word Go here. This is just a word that's going to appear up here in this area later. We're going to choose ... for the main class. This is the only option we care about. There's only one option, that's our main. And we're going to click OK. So when I click this play button, that's going to run our project. I already know this is going to fail, and I'm going to show you why and explain to you in just a moment. When I press this, we can get this little dialog box. This happens once ever for the most part. And then we have an error while it's trying to run a program. Release version 5 not supported. If you get this dialog box here, just click Don't Ask Again. Project configuration files can be added to Git. We don't ever want to add our project configuration files to Git. Okay, so we have to deal with this error. Maven, which is what this file controls, is pom.xml, has a built-in internal set of default values for everything. And that's wonderful for creating consistent builds every time. One of the default values is the version of Java that it compiles with, and it is 5. That is the version that it defaults to. Well, we just installed 11, and 5 is just way too old for 11 to run. So we need to make a small adjustment to this file to let Maven know that we want to use Java 11. And by the way, letting Maven know that in turn lets our IDE know that. And you do that by creating a properties element. And then in here, we're going to make a property, maven.compiler.release 11. And that's it. Whenever you make a change to pom.xml, it's a good idea to click into this Maven tab and click this little circle icon. You'll see kind of a little synchronization message down here. It just lets the IDE rediscover itself and reconfigure itself to work with the settings that we've put into our POM. So now we're going to press play again. and now we have hello world. So just a couple other quick odds and ends to show you. Our two files are green. All right, we're going to commit these two files to version control by clicking this green checkbox or typing Control K. You'll get this little pop-up on the left here. It says we have two files in our change list. That's the main Java and the project object model file. And we're just going to type a little message here. You have to type a message here. It will not let you commit without one. I'm going to use this phrase initial commit, and I'll click on it. The very first time you ever use Git, it's going to ask you for your name. I'm going to just type in Chris Z, and it's going to ask you for an email address. So I'll just use chris@email.org. And then I'll set and commit this. By setting this globally, it means that any future project that you work on this workstation will have those values. And it should never ask you for that again. So now we've committed our files. The way version control works in IDEA is really straightforward. If I make a change here, my file turns blue. Blue files means that it's changed from the last committed version. If I want to roll this back, I can press this little undo button here, and I could say roll it back, and my changes revert to the original. It's much more cooler than just making, rolling back small changes like that. If I'm working in a project and I delete this main file, and then I create a new class, I call it better main. I'll add this to version control, and I've got this whole grid idea, and then I realize this idea is terrible. I want to go back to what I started with. Well, when you press this rollback button, you can check everything. I'm going to check this button here and delete local copies of edited files to completely roll back everything I've done, and it will bring my project back to the state it was before I started. So the power of using Git with an IDEA is just tremendous for working with projects. One last thing I want to show you is the integrated documentation that we had set up earlier. If I'm writing some code and I'm not quite familiar with, say, how the print line function works, or method works rather, I can press Control Q and get some pop-up documentation. And this is pulled from that documentation we linked on the earlier screen. If I would like to see the documentation in a browser, I can follow this link, and it will bring up the JDK documentation in a browser. And this, again, is really, really useful as you're writing code and trying to understand project libraries and try to get quick access to documentation. And that's it. Now we have Hello World.